Liz. Welcome to Keep What You Earn.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Would you mind introducing yourself real quick to those listening?
Yes. My name is Liz Leonard. I'm a franchise advisor, also a franchise owner, and I work nationwide. I happen to live in the Portland, Maine market, but that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. What franchise do you own, by the way?
We own a kitchen tune-up franchise. So we are part of a very large franchise system with multiple brands. We're in the home service brand category, which is kind of invisible for a lot of people. They don't realize what home service brands are or home-based brands. We don't have a brick and mortar location. We actually go to the customer, provide the service.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a perfect segue into I have questions now about, I thought franchising. When you think franchising, you think I think of fast food. I think of restaurants. I think of Massage Envy. I think of a lot of these other storefronts, brick and mortar that you see popping up in strip malls. I always picture this is what a franchise looks like, is that you're using an existing model, you're popping up a store, but you just kind of shook me up for a second where I was like, wait a minute, there's no storefront and this is a completely different type of industry. So could you just help me and our listeners understand what types of businesses are franchises and talk about this market for a second?
Yeah, this is a great segue to start our podcast today. So it's kind of the best kept secret in franchising, that if you think about home service brands, they're essential brands, or anything that you can do with your home, floor to ceiling, inside and out, that is demand driven, installed, maintained, warranted, and you just don't want to do it yourself. I mean, I'm sure you've had work done in your home and you brought in a specialty service to do it. Our kitchen tune-up franchise, we do cabinet refacing, we do new redooring, we do new kitchens, we do restoration work on cabinets, but we go to the customer. So we make it seamless, efficient. We are in and out of their house, but there's many brands. So, but you are right. There is more than food in franchising. And most of the people that I talk to for the first, conversation, they think about food. And so we start there, and it's, but I haven't placed anybody in food in 10 years. I've been a franchise advisor for 10 years and really because of the model. It's expensive. You have a lot of personnel issues. It's 7 days a week and the list goes on. But the home service brands is a really big category, and there's hundreds of them. And I won't go into, I can give you examples, but again, if you're sitting in your home right now, you look at the windows, you look at the landscape, security systems, flooring, gutters, roofing, painting. And then of course we have the other side, which we do have some coaching and training and those types of franchises as well. So, but home service brands are a lower risk. They are a lower investment, which people are looking for, and the margins are stronger. You don't require a location. So it's just easier, and it's also a quicker launch for people versus getting a building and doing site selection, which could take 9 to 12 months to get that business open.
Very true. I find that a lot of people identify with, I know I want to be my own boss. I know I don't want to work for corporate or work for another big company, but they immediately default to, therefore, I must start my own business. I must start from scratch and I must build it from the ground up. And what I love about what folks like you do is you kind of shake that up and go, well, wait a second. Somebody already built it for you. And you could plug in, just invest capital in and put it into a machine that's already working. Who would you say, Liz, are the best fit people to explore this option versus starting their own business, from scratch?
I think there's a pretty big audience out there for it, and it takes research and it takes time and due diligence to see if you're a good fit. There's a lot of pieces that you need to look at yourself. I call it the you factor. And we need to leverage the transferable skills. Yes, franchising has the proven track record. Historically, it's got the operating systems. Everything's done. So it's much easier for somebody to transition either out of corporate America into the business, but we also help them evaluate, have they managed people before? Who's going to do customer acquisition? Who's going to do the accounting? Who's going to do the finance? The systems are built for you, but somebody still has to execute and implement and manage those processes. And many people will put a manager in these businesses to operate them, but many of the franchise models actually require people to build their own executive team, which we call an owner-operator model. And so depending on, again, the bandwidth and what they can contribute for hours, I always tell people it's time and money. Let's talk about what you have. And then a follow up to that is let's leverage your skills. And we give everybody a skills assessment so we can identify those, because it's a really important way of saying, are you going to be capable or available or willing to do sales, for example? Somebody has to do that. They don't just automatically show up and give you cash.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception too that it is so plug and play that like you buy a franchise and it's like, cool, when do I cash my check? Like it's not that easy. Do you ever encounter folks who are looking to invest in a franchise who maybe underestimate how much involvement they're going to have in the success of the company? Like, do you find people who are kind of on the assumption that it's going to just print money, so to speak?
I think there are those people out there. I think one of the things that we try to do, and I know the franchise companies do a really good job at, is what is the day in the life of an owner going to look like? Let's talk about it from 8 a.m. to whatever, when you end at 6 p.m., whatever the schedule might be. And if you fit that profile and you're drawn to that and you can see yourself doing it and visualizing it, the energy is going to be there. You're going to be drawn towards it. But if you have that visualization and working with the company and they're going through all the different aspects and you're like, this is not a good fit for me, that is not what I signed up for, then we should not be talking to that franchise company. We should try to find one that is going to fit, your profile better, which is what we really spend time with candidates and holding them accountable, talking about, do they have spousal support? Do they have children? Are they taking vacations? Are they going to be able to do a 2-week training with the franchise company? Are they going to bring a manager to the training? So that all helps define that role. And if they're willing to take that on, again, research and facts are going to help them form that decision. And it's up to them to make sure that they're very thorough in their due diligence to get those answers. And they'll know.
Yeah. If someone's exploring the idea of investing in a franchise, what are some of the questions they can ask themselves honestly, or, obviously engage folks like you to ask them, but what are some of the questions that should be coming up for an investor or for someone who's looking at purchasing to identify if this might be a good fit for them?
I think there's 2 categories. The investor mentality is a little bit different than, let's say, an owner operator who's going to go in and build their executive team. They are going to roll their sleeves up. They are going to learn every aspect of that business. They will be hiring. I'm sure there's a recruiting platform, another system available that they can utilize for this, but they actually need to go in and learn it. And there's nothing like a business that is owned and operated and the owner is present. We all know that, but it's not ideal for everybody. So I think the question they need to ask themselves is, are they ready for the hard work? I mean, I have many people that I speak with that have the corporate job. They're miserable. The growth is not there. They're not challenged intellectually. They're just looking for more. And the only way for them to get more is to get on a plane, for example, maybe, and they aren't going to be around family and they're missing events. But I also think that there's a reality that, do you have what it takes to operate a business? And it's a shocker for a lot of people. I mean, you just are submerged in drinking from a fire hose is probably a great analogy for some of the new franchisees that I've kind of coached, and they've ended up investing in a franchise. And, even the technology platforms now, you need to be ready, hit the go button. Yeah. And then the investor mentality is very, very different in my opinion. The investor mentality usually is somebody who has operated companies. They may have their own controller, their own team, bringing their own C-suite with them. And so they're looking to diversify their portfolio by buying multiple units across the country. But they've got the experienced team already. And that's pretty typical of a high-level investor. So I think they're very different paths and very different skill sets.
And what is obviously numbers will vary. Obviously, it depends shell around everything I'm asking, but what are some like the levels of capital needed to invest? Because I think you mentioned before that it might be less capital than starting your own business in certain situations, especially at the home services example you gave. what are we looking at in terms of investment of capital? Is it typically lower than starting a business, or what are some of the considerations there?
That's a great question. Each one of those situations is going to be unique to the person. Of course, we know that.
Yep.
But if we look at the home service brands, you are not going to have a brick and mortar to pay for. So therefore, the overhead is much lower. And just to clarify that, you won't be paying a lease payment for your customers to come see you. So a lot of people are drawn to those brands because of that. It's just it's a quicker launch, right? It could be a 4 to 6 month open my new business versus the brick and mortar. I need to have a lot of money invested. I need to do all of the retrofit for the building, make it look beautiful. And then I have to hire staff and I have to get insurance, and there's a parking lot and there's people. So it's much bigger, right? A lot more moving parts with that. But I would say, to give you kind of just a ballpark to answer your question on investment, the home service brands, again, anything to do with your home, and they do some commercial business as well, but those are typically under $150,000. So that is a very, reasonable investment for, you have vehicles, you have people, you have systems, you have marketing, you have training. So there's a whole scope of, line by line what you'll have. But the brick and mortar, those are going to be anywhere from $350,000 and up. And those are just ballpark, but to give people an idea. So again, depending on the profile of the person and their investment portfolio and what they have willing to spend, that's another big differentiator that we look at. What can you and your family risk at this point in your life? So how old are you? When are you going to retire? What are we looking for? And then again, skill set, experience, market. I do more home service brands than I do brick and mortar. But it really depends on the person that I'm coaching and what they're looking for.
Yeah, it's always going to depend on the goals, because how much time they have to spend, how much money they have to spend, and what their actual goals are for the business, how it's going to fit into their overall goals. Could you just shed some light on some other examples of franchises that people may not be thinking of initially by instinct when they hear franchises? Because I know home services you mentioned, obviously there's food, but what are some of the other placements that you've made, since you said you haven't really touched food in 10 years? What are you touching?
Yeah, no, I will share with you. I have a background in healthcare. That was my corporate career before I became an entrepreneur. And we have a lot in the education space. So with children, there's a lot in that space. And those businesses are really designed for the DNA of a person that wants an impact business, a purpose-driven business, and a passion business. So we know who those people are, right? They're few and far between, and we usually identify some of those traits on their skills assessment, which is helpful. So education is great. Obviously, hair care is another big one too. The salon suite model is always interesting to talk about, because if you think about post-COVID, the salon suite model has kind of exploded, because there are these private suites that, hair care artists can rent space from. And it's just such a simple business, but very much needed, right? Essential service as well. Self-storage is another example. My husband and I used to own a self-storage business. It was not a franchise, but we have a lot of those also. A lot of moving franchises are coming into play too. Then the one that is really interesting in the medical space, we have a Vertigo and Balance franchise called Physical, and they have over 500 units. And my husband and I both have vertigo, and there's just not enough research and science out there, but this brand specializes in that, and they have physical therapists working for them. There's a clinical leader. So those are some examples of, ones that I have helped people kind of determine whether it's a good fit. Again, depends on the market. I have an investor right now that I'm working with. He is looking at a couple of different medical franchises in the South Boston area.
Okay, cool. Fun fact, I used to live in South Boston, so that's awesome. So there are so many options. Help me with, if I'm thinking about investing in or operating a franchise, and this is something that's always kind of like piques my fancy, because I'm like, this would be interesting to do. I used to work at McDonald's for 7 years, and I learned how they operated. I think they drilled that so far into my head. I think I still know the temperature the beef has to be at, or how long the chicken nuggets will last in the tray. Like I know that stuff so good from when I worked there. And I always think about businesses like that and go, God, it makes so much sense why someone would want to run a business this way, because they prescribe everything for you. And it was not easy, but it took a lot of the mistakes out of the process. So it made me think, when you're looking at potentially running a franchise, what are some of the key factors from the other side, from the side of the investor or operator, that they should be looking at when they're evaluating companies to invest in?
That is a loaded question. I love it. There are so many things that they need to pay attention to. So when they first starting to talk to a franchise company, they're overwhelmed, of course, with the information, but they're going to break down all those systems. You just mentioned some of them. So every week, the franchise company will educate them on product service system. And there's a lot of questions in each of those. And then obviously you need to kind of be able to understand them, experience them. The best part about the entire franchise investigation process, which takes anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, just for a timeline, is they will be interviewing owners. And they can call anybody in the franchise disclosure document. So they're all listed publicly. Every owner, every McDonald's owner is listed. So if you're vetting out that franchise and you're at the point where you're interested, you actually get to contact each one of them. Questions that you might ask the owners are, how was your training? How has the support been? Would you do it again? Is always a good question.
I love that question.
Yeah. Would you do it again? And they may own multiple units. So it's a great question to say, why did you choose 3? Did they choose more? And then, there's the fact finding mission, are you successful? What are your profit margins? What advice do you have for me as I venture into this brand? So you can talk to others who are already doing that thing that you're thinking about doing. And that is, how many chances in life do you get to talk to somebody like try it before you buy it kind of thing? So
yeah, references, basically. It's like, what if I had references on people who have already tried exactly what I'm trying to do and could kind of warn me about the speed bumps?
Yeah. And there are a lot of speed bumps. And, every business owner is very unique in how they're paying themselves, the benefits that they're taking from the company, how they're incentivizing their employees. So a lot of people want to get right to the money. Like, what are you making? But inside that number, there is a lot of different type of, layers to it. And you really have to dig into it and quantify it and qualify it.
I absolutely love that. That's such a good point. And that's a great segue into, the lived experience of a franchise owner, because it's not as easy as you think. I think that people kind of have this myth or this preconceived assumption that, oh, it's great, they do everything for you. You just have to basically show up, plug in, and go. And to some extent, maybe more so than starting your own business, but I know there's a lot of struggles and challenges along the way. Can you speak to a little bit about the experience of the folks you work with and the challenges they face on a daily basis?
I think there is a challenge. One of the things that I hear from the franchisees a lot of times is we've had to pivot a lot this week. And so it's interesting to hear strategizing, but one of the beautiful things that they will share with you is that they can call the neighboring franchisee and say, have you dealt with this problem? What did you do? And so you're quick on your feet, you're able to make decisions, but again, you can get some facts to help you make that decision to pivot, because you don't want to pivot in the wrong direction. But I think, having enough working capital for your business is probably number one. Always have extra. And you want to make sure you're well insulated in terms of you can't do everything. So I think there is a book out there about the different colored hats that everybody wears in a business, and you can't wear all of them. And so you need to have a realistic view on what you're good at. So again, going back to those skill sets, you're going to lean towards what you're good at, and you're going to lean away from what you're not good at. And you need to be smart about not creating a problem and, trying to do everything. You just can't do it. So you have to pay people to do things and build that team. And I think it's hard for a lot of people because they might think nobody's going to do it like I do it.
Very true. You mentioned assembling that team and assembling the executives in some cases. How much support do the franchisors, I have to be like specific, franchisors, how much do they provide in terms of like, you know, if selfishly, I'm thinking about the accounting function and like the legal and all that stuff. They go, hey, we recommend using this type of accountant or this type of lawyer or this type of insurance or whatever. Like, how much involvement do they have in selecting some of those individual service providers? Or is that really all on the franchisee to vet out and to hire and engage?
I think there's pros and cons to both sides. There are some franchise systems out there right now that are offering all of those internal systems. And it's a done for you system, I think is the phrase that they're using. So for many people, the benefits are lined up. You don't need to go search for all those resources and everything's done under one umbrella. So simple. Digital marketing, for example, typically you'll find a company will have a digital marketing vendor because they're familiar with the brand and they have really formulated a system across the country. Even with ours, with kitchen remodeling, you know, they're putting out some beautiful pictures of before and after. That's what people want to see. So again, you're in a system. So they do all the digital marketing. I can jump in at any point in time with our franchise and customize things, but they'd actually do a good job. So the accounting, same thing. I like to pick my accounting team. I think it's important. That's a really personal relationship. And I'm sure you have a background in this. So accounting, CPA, those things are those are personal things. I like to have control over that myself, but some of the systems do offer. Here are the vendors, and vendors are something that, you know, if you study historically in franchising, they have a Rolodex of vendors. They're available. You don't need to go hunt for them. You can choose them. Many of them are required too. So that's in your due diligence phase. As you investigate franchise brands, you need to find out, am I locked in with this particular vendor or do I have free reign to go outside?
And talk to me a little bit about are there ongoing requirements? I know there's a financial investment of like franchise fees, which I want to talk about a little too, like what the expectation is with regard to the investment and support provided, but also the expectations of the franchisee. Like, are they attending periodic training? Are they getting certified in certain things? Like, are there certain requirements that we have to keep in mind as well to maintain that franchise?
There are. There's typically, just to clarify too, there's a minimum royalty that is usually in their franchise agreement. So again, you're digging deep and you probably have your franchise attorney reviewing that information. So you're very clear on that. And, you know, any fees that are ongoing, those would be, you know, very clear in the agreement as well. But in terms of, you know, what they're paying for, they are in a system, they are treated like everybody else across the country. Everybody is paying the same fees. They may upgrade the technology systems because look where we are in this day and age, things change all the time. And they're upgrading and making the systems more efficiently. And if there's something that's going to benefit the franchisees, they're going to go implement that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we can go deeper on that if you want to.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like, you know, other than, we'll say, I'm familiar with the royalties, which I'd love to dig into, like how the different structures could work on that. You know, royalties from, you know, am I paying a percentage of sales? Am I paying a flat fee per year? Am I paying a flat fee plus? Am I paying, because we always talk about there are all these different structures and models of how, I think I think of the food one again because it's the most prominent, but I hear people talking about Chick-fil-A and how they basically monetize like 2 or 3 different ways with the real estate and then with the food and then with the royalty. So it's like, you know, all these clever ways that they monetize it, but yet everyone still makes money. You know, what have you seen in terms of ways that people can navigate this, or royalty structures and other ways that, based on your experience, have worked for franchisors in the past?
I think it's pretty standard in the industry. There are a handful of franchises that I can think of in my inventory that have a flat fee royalty, but many of them are the percentage of sales. Anywhere 7% is kind of an average across the country. But inside that 7%, there is something called the National Brand Advertising Fund. And so every franchisee is contributing a portion into that number, and it is helping with broadcasting the brand across the country to have a much bigger footprint in terms of, we can use digital marketing for an example. I would say that's probably standard for anybody listening today, that you can ask. It's very important to make sure, and your agreement will have you basically locked in with that number for, most contracts are 10 years. There are some that are 5.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like the bunch of roommates who contribute to the buying the toilet paper and the paper goods for the house, right? It's just like, that's the pooled fund for all of us to benefit, right?
Yes, it is. That's a fun analogy. I like that. And
it's like, yeah, that's what, like living with 5 roommates. That's my first go-to. Is I was like, oh, it's like the toilet paper fund.
The franchise fees are an interesting topic too. And they are, I'd say they're becoming more standardized for the industry. There are a lot of emerging brands that are trying to, grow their footprint across the country. So they may not be as well established. And so, they can't be charging a standard fee, and they're going to build up to that. That's the goal. Yep. And it really depends on the founder and all of those things. But I would say that's pretty standard too. I mean, some are, I've seen them as low as 40, 45. I've seen high as 65. So it really depends on the brand. And it also depends on how they package that up, which again gets back into reviewing that agreement very carefully with your franchise attorney. So does that include your territory license? Does that include any training fees? So you need to really measure what's in that fee, and don't just assume it's one and done.
Yeah, because there's additional costs if you have to pay your way to go to these trainings and to pay for the travel, the airfare, the hotel, the actual participation. Do you need to go to an annual conference and pay your way? Do you need to send multiple employees to training seminars? Like, what does that actually include? I think people always underestimate how much anything would cost, because it sounds like, oh, it's all included, but it's like, nah, not quite. Like, there's always going to be ancillary costs. There's always going to be additional things and unexpected events, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the events, I know you brought it up earlier too. So they do have an annual conference convention. Usually it's, there's education, there's speakers, it's networking. It's a powerful opportunity. Some companies charge an annual fee for them to go to that. Some do not. So again, these are all, that may not be standardized. And then, traveling to visit with other franchisees is always beneficial. You may, launch your business, but maybe the person that's 60 miles away has been very successful and they're a leader in the industry. Then you're going to go travel and spend time with them and have them mentor you. It's just another benefit of the franchise system. But yeah, traveling, conferences, training. Some of the companies include training for extra people. So again, the details matter.
For sure. And it does sound like a great kind of shortcut into entrepreneurship, because it will help you. I've talked about this with folks before, that it's an interesting model because it can leverage some of your own skills. If you're a systems driven person, maybe somebody who just appreciates a really good process that's like, the checklist is already made. Yay, this is great. I just have to follow this checklist. And they're like a good recipe type person. They can follow the program really well. And then maybe one day you start your own, but God, will you learn so much from owning and operating a franchise. I learned a lot from working within one about how to run a business, because you're kind of seeing how a well-run machine is run. And you have that point of reference that if you even were to create a business in the future, this seems like a really good way to lay a foundation. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree. And one of the other really interesting statistics about the franchise model, which you're probably going to get to it, is your exit strategy. And when you are investing in a brand gives you that power, right? That bandwidth, and you're in a system. And when you exit the system, you are part of the brand. And those are very attractive to a lot of people. And when you have a startup on your own, you have to build your own brand. And that takes, sometimes it can take, many years to build your brand and the trust and the reputation. And with the franchise system, for many people, you step into the franchise, you are part of the brand, you execute, you implement, you keep the quality there, but you have that brand presence. So for a lot of people, Liz, the question they ask is, what do you have for big brands? You mentioned McDonald's. Everybody knows it, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's recognized. So like, I actually know this. Well, I know this from working there, but even then, if someone said they owned and operated a McDonald's, I already have an assumption that like they know what they're talking about, or that they understand operations, or they understand something, because there's a certain degree of, well, in order to do this, you kind of have to have certain chops, and it will help them in their career, even if they go beyond that. But exactly what you said, I want to go into the exit for a second as we wrap things up and ask you how this ties into kind of like how the exit strategy ties in. Like, what are the ways that folks can leverage this to accomplish the bigger goals and move on from the franchise? You know, is it part of a bigger goal? Is it sometimes the end game for people? Like, where does it fit in typically with your customers?
Yeah, exit strategy is really important. And I think if you're working with a good franchise advisor, your franchise attorney, you know, a reputable franchise company, they're all going to bring this up to you. It should be beginning with the end in mind. And I think for many people, they're short-sighted with that. And so exit strategy is key. And what does everybody want to buy in a business? Cash flow. So we go back to the system and show me the money, build it, and you want to exit, and you want to exit basically and dance your way out. And then somebody wants to dance their way in, and they want to have a business that actually has legs, it's strong, it's built, and the reputation is there, the quality is there. In our day and age, it's the reviews. But I think there are a lot of great companies out there that have a solid, we call them resale departments or a resale strategist within the franchise system. It's going to become, if it's a bigger brand, you know, they've had people in for 20 or 30 years. They know that they have people exiting the system. So their support to those franchisees is crucial to support them. And if you think about the benefits of that, they've had a great franchisee in, solid cash flow. You sell at a multiple of earnings. And we don't want to get into that. You're the expert in that, not me. Right? So looking at the numbers, but people look for positive cash flow businesses. And I always remind them, you're going to pay more versus doing their own startup. You're going to pay more. You might as well realize that now. And, you know, you may be able to acquire a team that's already in place, which would be phenomenal. You can negotiate having the owner stay on and do some training. But I think a message to some of the new franchisees going forward is, whatever franchise you invest in, you want to make sure that there's that support system for your exit strategy. A lot of the young companies don't have this. And if you want to get out in 5 or 7 years, you want help, right? You want help getting the valuation done. You want help getting it listed. Who's going to take those leads? You're busy running the company. You're still working. And so it's really important to have that support system to help you exit gracefully and peacefully.
I agree. Yeah, gracefully and peacefully. It's important to, like you said, it goes back to the beginning with the end in mind, which I don't think enough people do. I think even when they start their business, they don't know how they'll exit. It's even harder to sell a business, to your point, that doesn't have the brand recognition or doesn't have the cash flow, that might be strictly connected to the owner's brand personally or the owner's work. And when you can distance the owner from the brand or from the business, I think there's a potential increase in value, or at least increase the transferability, I would say, of that, which if that's part of your goal, then that makes total sense. But not enough people, in my opinion, are thinking about the exit and thinking about the end in mind. They're thinking about like the next fun thing to occupy themselves, in a sense.
They are. But I think just having a plan, and it could be a retirement plan. And we also see a lot of families now investing in businesses in the franchising space that are building a legacy for their family. I mean, we could talk about that, a whole nother subject. But many families are, you know, thinking recurring revenue. I've got the experience. I've got the money. I can teach, and I'll get the benefits from it. So family legacy is a whole nother topic, but I am seeing more and more of that with families. And maybe it's, you know, their son or daughter is not loving the college, first job, second job, third job, and they're ready for entrepreneurship.
Love it. Yeah, it's an option for more people than I think we assume. And I think that if more people open up their minds to this instead of, necessarily starting from scratch, I think it could be a great head start for people. As far as how to actually really get started, Liz, I know you have an amazing resource in the form of your book. Could you mind talking about that for a second and where folks can find it and what's included in the book?
Yeah, so excited about the book. And a lot of people ask me why I wrote the book. Why would you write a book? And the reason we wrote the book is to educate more people, help them find the ideal business, but make an informed decision. And during COVID, I'm an educator by college. I put together this learning portal so people could see. We've talked about a lot today, but there's a step-by-step system to evaluating a business or any big investment. All those pieces are put together. So any candidate that I'm coaching gets to log into the portal. I have weekly coaching sessions with them. And I thought, why don't I just share this with the world? Why don't I educate more people? I have saved so many people from buying the wrong business. I mean, I have a great example for the next podcast, and he's in the book actually. And, I wanted to advocate for people. I want them to be proactive and think about what it's going to take. So the book is designed to show them the system and the steps, but it also defines franchising. We interviewed 8 franchisees, which I feel like is just phenomenal part of the book. But it focused on their why. Why would you start a business? And then why did I write a book? I put the two worlds together. And I want people to know that motivation drives success. And if I can be their resource, their coach, they can use my book as a tool, and I can help more people just, make their dreams happen of entrepreneurship. It's not for everybody. You and I both know that. But right. For a lot of people, it's something they've always wanted to do, and maybe they came from an entrepreneurial family. So,
definitely. So let's drop the name of the book and where folks can find it.
Yeah, the book is called Your Franchise Fast Pass. It is a fun name, and the rationale behind it is to help people get really to the front of the line. People don't know where to start. So if we can help people with a concrete system, where do you go? What do you do? They're overwhelmed, and work with somebody that is a trusted partner. So Your Franchise Fast Pass, it's a short read. We've got franchisee stories in there. You can find it on franchisefastpassbook.com. We have a couple of different ways to find it, but that is definitely the dedicated book site. So again, it's franchisefastpassbook.com.
Amazing. We're going to have that link in the show notes for everybody listening, and make sure you pick up a copy of that. In fact, Liz, where are you active on social media if people want to learn more from you? Do you have any accounts where you're super active?
Pretty much everywhere. I have LinkedIn, I have Twitter, I have Facebook. We have everything designated under Your Franchise Fast Pass. I have my personal account too, obviously as an author and advisor and an owner. So I think I'm pretty easy to find, very accessible, but I'm happy to talk with anybody. And I forgot to mention, and it is in the book, my services are free. There is no risk for anybody to have a conversation. And I'm here really as kind of the Sherpa to help people. If they want to go down that path, let's evaluate it. Let's see if it's for you. And if it's not, it's okay. But
totally. So guys, if you're active on social media, make sure you find Liz, you find Franchise Fast Pass, you tag them, you tag me, Shannon K. Weinstein on Instagram, Keep What You Earn everywhere else on every major platform. And you tell us what one of your biggest takeaways was, anything that you learned today in today's episode, or if you're picking up the book, what you're learning from the book. And if you're sharing what you're learning and you're sharing this episode, we would be happy to send you a copy of this book when this goes live, and share it with more people. So Liz, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your book with everybody listening.
Oh, you're welcome. And I have to get a plug-in for Amazon. The book will be on Amazon. So if they really want to find it, they can find it on Amazon. But thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. Thank you.